as I'm sure as many people will see, because it's been across all of the other leftoid channels recently, there's going to be a universal basic income trial in the UK. Novara were covering it on their Novara Live yesterday. What's cool, actually, is that the Green Party have it as part of their policy platform, which, is good. I'm glad that there is at least some political party who's even close to the mainstream who has some attention being paid to the issue of universal basic income, because it would be an interesting idea. So that's why another reason for you to vote Green at the next election rather than Labour, because they actually have good policy. But there are people out there who are not happy with the idea of a universal basic income, including Charlie from Pimlico Plumbers, the most hinged man on Twitter. He's got mad about that and says people are talking rubbish on a debate on Talk TV. So we'll see what he has to say about that.
A group of 30 lucky people are set to be paid £1,600 a month.
Let's start. Back.
A group of 30 lucky people are set to be paid £1,600 a month with no strings attached. This is as part of the first trial of a universal basic income here in the UK. Joining me to talk about this is Charlie Mullins, the CEO of Pimlico Plumbers. Thank you, Charlie, for coming in. And Jack Kellum, who's a researcher at Autonomy, and that is the company that's running the trial. So I think we'll start with you, Jack, since you're running the trial. What is the purpose of giving people...
Again, you've got to understand the you've got to understand the level of balance they've got here. They've got a professional who runs the study, who does these studies for a living, and who knows the inner workings of it. And on the other end of the discussion, you have just some guy who runs a plumbing company. Okay, brilliant. Well, I guess the standard of debate on this one's going to be incredibly high. Looking forward to it.
All this money every month. They don't have to work for it. It's kind of like a present, a free gift. What are you trying to establish by doing this?
So we're working with local people in North London and Jarrow, where we're planning for these trials to be held. We're really interested in finding out what the effect is of giving 30 people £1,600 a month unconditionally, to see what the effects are both on their physical and mental health, but also on other factors like employment outcomes, and their financial security too. So we've seen a wave of experimentation around the world recently, in the US particularly, where there's been lots of similar experiments, but also in Europe as well, in Finland. We want to see what the effects are here in the UK, where we know already we've had a welfare system which the United Nations have called cruel and inhuman, where often people are locked into poverty and locked into poorly paid, insecure jobs by the current welfare system. So we want to see with...
Yeah, because really and truly, right, the reduction of benefits, the draconian kind of welfare system that we have to try and force people out of welfare is being done for one reason and one reason only, and that's for there to be more labour market competition to be able to drive down overall wages for the working class people in this country. The only reason it's being done, there is no, kind of conservative mindset backing this of, well, we can't give people stuff for free. Oh no, these people are just benefit scroungers. None of that shit, right? The people at the top do not care about whether people are not working or not. All they care about is whether or not that they can undermine the wages of other people. And so that's why they do it.
This cohort of people, where we're planning for the trial to take place, you want to see what effect an alternate, different sort of system has on their physical and mental health and on their status in jobs and so on.
And who is funding this?
So we're still looking for funding for this pilot program. So this report sets out a plan for a pilot in the UK. Similarly, in the US, there's been private philanthropy and charities have looked to fund this because they're interested in seeing what the effects are of different forms of welfare systems. So we're looking for this in the UK. Obviously, we've already seen in Wales, there's recently been a pilot funded by the Welsh government, which has been focused on young people leaving care. So we'll be really interested to find out what results are there on that cohort. But for this pilot, we're looking to have a much broader range of people and different demographics involved, so we get a broader cross-section of society.
Okay, listen to see what...
I mean, obviously the cruelty is part of the point because they enjoy the cruelty. You've got to remember that a lot of the cruelty that they're going for is just anybody from the underclass. So by reducing benefits, they get to, first of all, treat the people who are on welfare who are members of the underclass, right? They get to move those people down even further, but they also, as a product of that, get to also undermine working class people as well. It's all about divide and conquer at the end of the day.
Charlie says in response, and then I'll come
It's
straight.
it's, it's the perfect divide and conquer policy because it's literally one policy that makes one group of people disenfranchised at the expense of a group that are also being disenfranchised by the same policy, who are also fighting against the people who are being more disenfranchised than them. It was the ultimate in divide and conquer.
Straight back to you. Charlie, £1,600 a month as an experiment to see what that does for people's mental health and physical health and financial security and prospects and all of that. I mean, it sounds like a dream, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's Disneyland. I think it's they're living in these people who come up with these research things or think tanks. They're not living in the real world. They're not living in the world where people go to work. If you're taking money out of the
I mean, they are living. I mean, the real world is where these studies have been done and found to increase productivity rather than reduce it. And the idea that this is going to be some kind of crushing of productivity, which is the main thing, right? You are like the main reaction to these studies about universal basic income is the idea that, well, if you give people free money, that they won't work. When all the studies done so far have shown that isn't the case. That actually improves productivity. But we shall see. We shall see.
pot and giving them this £1,600 a month, and if they ever roll it out, it's going to cost absolutely billions. But they're discouraging people to go to work. We already have an issue with the work.
Again, citation needed. Again, these people, they don't have any studies, they don't have any arguments, they don't have any evidence. All they have is, well, it's just common sense, mate, innit? It's common sense. And that's why anyone who says the words common sense in any discussion can be completely ignored, right? Have some justification, have some evidence, right? Other than just say what makes sense. Because, common sense is an entirely subjective term. It means different things to different people. Because obviously, Alaska, as far as I'm aware, Big Al, I was listening to this on the on Unlearning Economics Live with Matt Bruenig. We're talking about how Alaska essentially have their own state wealth fund, and that pays out a dividend to each resident in Alaska every year, right? That's if I remember, that's the case. Which again would be even more reason to have a sovereign wealth fund in the country. Don't know why Norway doesn't turn their sovereign wealth fund into some kind of universal basic income. That'd be a good plan to be able to take, especially like a natural resource, which Norway does have, and then use that to be able to benefit everybody, or even more so than they do right now, right? Obviously, it benefits everyone by helping fund their public works programs and their public services. But by having the dividend as well, you'd have an additional way to be able to help out the entire country.
Working from home people, but all of a sudden you're going to be paying people, I think it's more than the minimum wage, which is about 22,000 a year, 24,000 to sit at home, do nothing, and these people don't need the money. They're not saying they're down on their uppers or anything. I mean, it's a crazy idea. The problem with these people is they've got all the degrees in mathematics, but they can't do basic maths. If you're giving money out of a pot...
Well, yeah, it's not a UBI because it's never the same amount as far as I'm aware, Big Al. Obviously, as it's a dividend, it's a payout based upon the current amount of profit of wealth out of the wealth fund being generated by the state government of Alaska. So, that it can't be a UBI because it fluctuates based upon the levels of profit. Well, again, the irony of some CEO who literally makes money out of the fact that he owns stuff, right? Just owning shares in the company that he's the CEO of, is the entirely how he makes all of his money. That's you. Yeah, you make money for nothing. You get given money for nothing off the backs of the work of the people that you employ, the surplus value that you've extracted from them. But again, he just has no evidence here. He literally has zero evidence at all. And the whole point about it being universal, and they say, well, it's not directed at the people who need it. Well, that's the whole point. The whole point of the universality, right? I'm sure that if there'll be basically no point doing the study and saying, what if we gave poor people more money? And so, brilliant, poor people, their life gets improved. Well, we found out if you give poor people money, their lifestyle gets improved. But you actually need to, if you're going to actually deal with the base fact of the experiment, which is trying to discover how the universality works, right? Then you have to have a proper stratification of different groups of people from different backgrounds and finding out how the actual basic income affects all different stratas, right? Is it going to reduce the productivity of people on the top of the economy as well as the bottom of the economy? You've got to properly understand all the different effects that it might have over the broader spectrum of different parts of the economy. Obviously, they'll say, well, just means test it. I'm like, well, no, means testing is shit and would generate the same resentment that we're seeing with the divide and conquer style stuff. And that's why Conservatives hate it. Not because they genuinely care about people deserving the money or not, because it fundamentally undermines their main position that they have to be able to campaign for their draconian economic principles based upon divide and conquer campaigning.
Someone's got to put it back in. The only people that can put it back in are the working class people paying tax, which means we've got to pay more. Unemployment will go up. There'll be so many businesses closed down. I've got to be honest with you. I don't know if it was a joke or a wind-up, or are these people for real? I've got to be
well, let me ask them, are you for real,
Well, it's incredible, this man who's supposed to... He's on the news constantly, right? Charlie Mullins is on the news every single fucking day of the year. Especially on Talk TV and GB News. Being asked to give his completely fucking nonsensical, uneducated opinions and everything. Then Tim's will come out and say, oh, I don't know why these people have done this. Like, yeah, this study, it's being done. Like, there's so many pilots of these things. It's been an idea that's been talked about for ages. In fact, talked about by people that I hate and he should love. You like Milton Friedman talked about this of a negative income tax. Even the libertarian neoliberal types, they think of the universal basic income as being a good thing for a different reason, right? They think that it maximizes people's ability to be able to participate in the market by have some capital to be able to engage in these market principles that they so stake their mass to. Obviously, I care more about people's genuine well-being. Either way, right? This has been something that's been talked about on both sides of the political spectrum for decades at this point.
Jack, are you for real?
We're definitely for real.
Okay, all right. Well, then what is the point of this? Because, I mean, lots of people watching this and listening to this programme now will think you get given £1,600 a month so that you and other people can see what effect this has on you. What effect is it going to have on you? It's going to be excellent. You've got £1,600 a month you haven't had to earn or worry about. How can that not be excellent for your mental health? How can it not be absolutely delightful? You can have all the sweets and comics you could possibly desire. Who wouldn't want that? OK, we find that out. And then what? You can't roll it out on a bigger scale. It's much too expensive. As Charlie says, who could possibly fund it?
Well, there's plenty of different levels you might set this universal basic income at if you rolled out at a national scale. So we're interested in a pilot scheme of paying a much more ambitious payment level, but there's been lots of modelling of cost-neutral forms of basic income, which are set at a lower level. So the think tank Compass have recently put out a report which shows that you could drastically reduce poverty, even paying us less significant basic income than this. There are lots of different ways of funding this which people are putting forward. We're focused here in this one on the small scale. We want to see the effects at a small scale in these local areas. What's really interesting is we've seen, in terms of employment, what we've seen from the evidence so far, whether that's in the US, in Finland and beyond, is giving people a basic income is actually gives them a much surer footing into employment. The current system doesn't work. It's not fit for purpose.
Well, let me run that by Charlie.
It doesn't help people into work.
So the suggestion
is that in poverty.
Jack, thank you. If you've got £1,600 coming in that you haven't had to work for, this is a much more secure footing to get you into work. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it makes complete no sense whatsoever. I mean, you're discouraging people to go to work. I mean, we're struggling already to get people into the workplace. Why would you...
What? Unemployment is at a record low. Literally, this is the lowest that unemployment has been in the UK since the 70s, right? We have a record low unemployment. If anything, we're finding it harder to be able to incentivize people to not retire rather than it is to get people into work from unemployment.
Encourage people not to go to work. And it's going to be an unfair system. You're going to divide in working people. Let's be honest, if you give this money...
No, the current system already does that, Charlie. The current system already splits working people and welfare recipients. Apart from, obviously, the 40% of welfare recipients who are in work, obviously that's a large percentage of our welfare bill, is propping up people's low wages. But... no, that's already happening. And now, even if you're in work or out of work, you will still be getting the universal basic income. That's what universal means. That's what universal means. And what's Charlie's employees going to do when plumbing becomes automated? suddenly he's not going to be much of a job creator, is he?
Money out of people, they're ponces. They're poncing off the country, they're poncing off hard-working people, and I've got to be honest, people like Jack,
I don't think that's what the word ponce means, unless I'm not up to date with the southeastern slang.
honestly, you need to change your job, mate, because what you're creating... No, you're laughing your head off, but what you're creating a big issue out there. How are people that are on minimum wage going to feel about the fact that you're giving someone more money and they're not to go to work? I mean, come on.
Because the people on minimum wage will be getting the same money as well. That's what universal means. Is this person so thick? Isn't that what the word universal means?
Fella, I mean,
so we've seen,
you wouldn't
so,
use
so
your
we've seen
money
over
to
recent
do it.
years. So we've seen over recent years that we're really subject to more and more crises in the economy. We've had COVID, we had a financial crisis before that. It's a cost of living crisis at the moment too. We know that going forward, we're going to be subject to more and more of these. The climate crisis on the horizon, right? People are going to be subject to unemployment. People are in much more insecure work than they were previously. Many people know that they might find unemployment around the corner. We need a welfare system which can factor this in, which provides people with the security and the dignity to be able to ensure
Honestly,
that they
fella, you're
have this
talking
basis
rubbish. I have to say it. I'm just saying, I'm going to be frank.
Again, I mean, it's clear this person is a researcher and not a debater. That's the problem, right? Is that when you get experts on, they're not rhetoricians at the very least. He's not pushing back on the right point here, because this fucking, melted waxwork of Rod Stewart over here seems to believe that there's the main point he was making is that there's going to be some level of resentment between people who work and people who are on welfare, when that's the whole point of the universal basic income, is to avoid that specific dynamic. Because at the moment that does what happen, where you just give welfare for people who aren't in work and everyone in work gets nothing, whereas universal basic income ensures that everyone gets access to it to remove the resentment. And because this research has not picked up on that, he's not responded in kind.
With you. You are talking rubbish. It's people like you that are ruining the economy by giving people money for nothing. It's just not done. You're not in the...
Yeah, because the worst thing in an economy which is going closely into recession, the worst thing we could possibly do is increase people's purchasing power to be able to engage in more economic transactions, which would increase GDP. The idea that the economy is that you're going to ruin the economy by giving people more purchasing power is just fucking nonsensical, right? It's whenever a conservative tells you, no one ever solved poverty by giving poor people money. They've not done any research, because all the research counteracts that. All real-world examples counteract that. How much poverty is there in the Nordic countries, compared to America? Look at or the UK even. Look at the countries which have redistributive economies. A, have stronger economies, and B, have less poverty than we do. And they do just give poor people money. All the evidence shows that giving poor people money literally does make them less poor. It does fix the issue. The reason why they say that is because they just fundamentally have a problem with redistributive economics. And so they make up the fact that it's bad for the economy or bad for poor people to try and throw people off, when all the evidence completely counteracts it. And again, as people are rightly pointing out in chat, this money literally gets money for nothing. Just because he owns shit, right? By getting, dividend payouts from his shareholdings in the company that he owns.
The real world. The country's in a state. People want jobs, and they're not going to go and work if you're giving them money to sit at home. I mean, common sense has got to come into it.
The country definitely is in a state.
Common
We've been
sense
told by the United Nations.
You're not even giving
told by the United Nations that our
I'm not interested in the United Nations. I'm talking about we're over here.
I'm not interested in experts telling me anything. I'm not interested in some bloke coming over here and telling me how facts work. I'm interested in my undiluted and uninformed fucking opinions, mate.
Been tried in Finland and various other countries. Of course it doesn't work. How's their mental health going to be? They're going to be laughing all the way. I mean, you're laughing because I think, I'm not going to use it, but I think you're taking the mick. Honestly, I think you're having a
I
blunder.
do think
We're
one of the
deadly
worrying parts,
serious.
Oh,
one of the
come on.
worrying parts, Jack, about this whole conversation is when I said to you, and how are you funding it? And you said, we're still looking for funding. The other thing I think that's worrying about it is it's only 30 people. Half of them are up north, half of them are in East Finchley in northwest London, which is a very expensive place to live. So it won't be comparable. It'll be in Jarrow, it'll be cheaper to survive on the money, or indeed have a great life on the money, than it will be in North London. It's such a
Finchley, I
tiny,
mean, but
but such a
Finchley actually has a
tiny
very
sample, Jack. Such a tiny sample that in that sample, empirically, there are going to be some people who flourish because some people flourish, some people who gamble all the money away, some people who have suddenly developed
Yeah, that's fine. There's no structural nature to how poverty works. I think it's all just some people are just bad and they deserve to be poor. Oh God, this is just I'm done. I'm done with these people. How they can just ignore every single study that's been done on these issues since time immemorial that just shows the complete opposite of their worldview. Redistributive economies make people better off. They reduce poverty. They make stronger economies when poor people have more purchasing power. These people, the fact that we just have, I mean, I'm not. Vanessa Feltz is actually one of the less bad people on Talk TV, but she just fundamentally doesn't understand complex things like what we're talking about here. Yet she has a gigantic a large platform, let's say, to bleat her uninformed nonsense to an audience of idiots and sycophants who are going to lap it up completely uncritically.
alcoholism because they can afford to drink as much as they want on the money. It's going to be very hard, isn't it, to conclude anything from that tiny sample of 30 people divided in half in Jarrow, half in northwest London, with this gift of £1,600 a month. I wonder whether there's any point in it.
So first of all, I would say that Finchley has actually a much more diverse set of economic backgrounds in there than often people might think of for North London. However, I would say, yeah, of course, 30 is less people we'd like to be testing out on a more major scale. That to be realistic.
It's too true, Jim. So true that, when you're a right-wing commentator, you just have to go, well, I reckon this is how this works. And all of the idiot fucking seals in the replies and the comments going, I agree, without any critical analysis whatsoever. No facts, no studies, no nothing. Just, I reckon this is how it works. Yeah? Bro, okay, well, you reckon that. It's just common sense, innit, mate? It's just common sense. That's it. That's the only thing. That's the only, that's the only response they have on any of these things.
Realistic for sets of the amount of funding we think is going to be possible for something like this.
Also,
you still get some
Jack,
really powerful personal stories, right, in terms of how this is going to impact on people. But if you see this as a starting point, in the US, there's been similar small-scale pilots, and this has led to a knock-on effect as pilots have spread around the country. So you have to start somewhere, right, with policies like this.
This is also going to go on for 2 years, Jack, isn't it? For 2 years, you're going to give all this money away to people across the country. And rightly, as Vanessa says, it doesn't prove anything. What would prove something is get them a job, make sure they go to work and contribute something. That's what will prove.
I'm sorry, if your response here is, okay, right, the issue is we can't draw any conclusions because it's a small sample size, right? That's a reasonable criticism of what's going on here, right? It's a reasonable criticism to say, well, it's a small study, a small sample size, how can you draw any large conclusions? But then his response is, just get him a job, mate. Okay, brilliant. We'll give 30 people jobs. Right? How can you draw any different conclusions when you're keeping the same sample size? But of course, this is just like a fucking a guy. He's a CEO. He's not somebody who's ever, I don't know, understood how the scientific method works, for example.
Prove something, because that will encourage
Gentlemen,
other
I have to
people.
conclude it there. Unfortunately, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I hope the viewers and listeners are too. Thank you very much, Jack.
Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Good to see you. So what do you think of that scheme? £1,600 a month. Is it fair?
Yes. I mean, it's probably not fair to do it just for 30 people, but the whole point about the pilot study is that then once you have proof of concept, you can roll out to more people. Again, trying to explain the scientific method to fucking random rent-a-gob Talk TV people. They're probably pissing in the wind, really, aren't I? You can prove anything with studies, right? I mean, to be fair, Matt Walsh was on his own show the other day, literally saying, I know there's studies showing this, but you can't trust peer review anymore, so you have to just go with what you reckon. You go with your gut instinct, as if that's the same as the scientific method. But, it shows that right-wingers never cared about the science at all, or anything like that. They just care about what makes them feel good. It's all about the ick, what gives them the ick. It's all just emotion for these people, Facts, unfortunately, Charlie, do not care about your feelings. Or, for that matter, facts don't care about your feelings of Vanessa either. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.